Before we go any further, I want to thank Looker for sponsoring the webinar series and helping us to make this happen. Looker is an inventive software company employing business intelligence to make data accessible to organizations and data analysts by focusing on the intersection of economics and engineering, helping customers use data to achieve success. Through their fresh approach to business intelligence, Looker helps businesses thrive with easily accessible and consistently defined information. So thank you again, Looker. On that note, please feel free to ask questions during today's session. You can submit them into the question panel on the right side of your screen. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can at the end of the presentation. And our lovely Eve will be acting as our question handler today, and she'll be happy to answer any burning inquiries that you might have. So say hello in the question box and let her know that you're listening. And lastly, if you're having any audio issues during today's presentation, you may wish to dial in by phone. You can do so by selecting the More button on the upper right portion of your screen and then select the Switch to Phone option. So today I am talking to Kate Owens, Megan Bubley, Diana Smith, and Erin France from SpotHero, Segment, and Looker, respectively. And since we have so many wonderful speakers today, I'm going to leave it up to them to introduce themselves. So Kate and Megan, why don't you please take it away? Megan, Kate. Just 1 second, everybody. There we go. Megan, Kate, please take it away. There we are.
Hello. Awesome. And then let's go to the agenda slide. All right. Hi, my name's Kate Owens. I'm the Senior Business Intelligence Manager at SpotHero, and I'm with Megan Bubley, who's one of our consumer product managers. And each of us have been at SpotHero, the company we work at, for over 4 years. And during that time, we've had the opportunity to see a lot of growth. And we've also had the opportunity to see some of the challenges that come with that growth, such as consistency of data between departments, and even more specifically between our departments, analytics and product. So today we're going to talk about how we've solved that challenge, partially by using tools like Segment and Looker. And we're also going to talk about how we use the tools Segment and Looker together. But first, Megan's going to give an overview of what SpotHero is for those of you who haven't heard of us.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Megan Bubley. I am a product manager on the consumer team here at SpotHero. Kate and I are really excited to share our story with everyone. So again, thank you for listening in, and hopefully we can answer some great questions at the end. So to kick things off, who is SpotHero? From the slide, you can see we're clearly very humble about what we do. Of course, I kid, but SpotHero is a parking platform that allows users to reserve and prepay for their parking from their smartphone or computer. We partner with different garages and operators across the US and now in Canada to help drivers find their perfect parking space. Our mission at SpotHero is to take the guesswork out of parking so users can focus on what matters most, which is enjoying time with friends and family and worrying less about finding a spot when they arrive at their end location. We believe that by designing better ways for our users to find, reserve, and pay for their parking, we not only make life a little easier, we also make our cities feel more accessible and our communities more connected. So now that we've covered some of the basics, let's talk about how SpotHero has changed since our launch back in 2011. Great. Kate had mentioned this in her introduction. We've both been at SpotHero for 4 years. Fun fact, Kate actually was the person who hired me. And I'm sure it's no surprise that a lot has changed in that time period. So when I first started at SpotHero, our main focus was really our core parking reservation service, which allows users to prepay for parking from their phone and then redeem when they get to the garage. We spent a lot of time really focusing our time and energy on optimizing what this purchase funnel would look like, and then building out analytics around that user journey to really drive home the features that we were building and the support that we needed. But as our business continued to grow and change, we realized that our product offering also needed to evolve with the times. So in addition to our reservation service, in 2016, we released our developer API kit and SDK, which allows partners to list and sell parking directly on their website. We released a new feature called SpotHero for Business, which allowed users to create a business account and complete a purchase with a different credit card and email address. And along the way, we also acquired a company called Parking Panda, which has opened the door for developing new parking related SaaS products, which has all been really exciting. And while this growth has been exciting and challenging and all of the things, one of the things we've realized is that adding all of these additional tools and features has made it really difficult for us to ensure that we have alignment across teams. And as a result, it's becoming even more difficult for us to maintain a tracking plan or a unified data definition across teams. And our product offering continues to evolve and change. So there's a lot of moving pieces. But before we dig into how we've begun to address some of these challenges, Kate's going to take a little bit more time to look at what the analytics landscape was like at SpotHero prior to integrating with Segment at Looker.
Right, yeah, so as our product has grown and become more complex, we've also grown our product and analytics team to help serve this. So what this looks like today, we have an analytics team consisting of 8 analysts who have specialties in different departments such as finance, supply, marketing. And then we also have a team of product managers who are also broken out into sub-teams such as consumer or operator. Now, in the analyst perfect world, every single data point would be in Looker. It's easier to maintain training in one tool. It's easier to disseminate information in one tool. And since we've had Looker since around 2015, it really is the tool that if you put data in there, people see it and things get done. But for the sake of being able to move fast and move without blockers, the product team has relied on other tools such as Mixpanel and Optimizely in order to get what they need to get done. So where this becomes an issue is twofold. We want people to be able to move fast, but we also want to make sure that people can work together and we're not doing duplicative work. So when I mentioned the issues, the first issue we have is that these tools will sometimes have different data sets. And we sometimes will want to be able to mix these data sets. So for example, Mixpanel might have some user data and it might be anonymous, and Looker might have some transaction data, and in order to combine those data points, we need a common identifier. So that's the first issue, is not being able to connect the data as much as we would like. And then the second issue, which is probably the most aggravating, is when you have 2 different data definitions in different tools, and they might sound like they mean the same thing, like something like new user count, but they're defined in slightly different ways. So come 2018, we knew we needed to get a handle on this, and it came at a perfect timing because we had made a lot of changes to our product flow. We had moved to more of a guest checkout, and we were in need for new event tracking. So if we go to the next slide, we can see what we implemented with Segment. So basically, we redid our tracking in one place using Segment. So instead of updating our event tracking separately for destinations like Google Analytics or Mixpanel, we did it in one place, which allowed us to really fine-tune our data definitions and make sure that there was alignment across all teams and we were maintaining this. Also really awesome about Segment is because we had moved to a more anonymous checkout flow, Segment did a really good job of helping us tie together previous anonymous users to known user IDs so you could connect behavior across devices. And so this is a current image of just our current setup. If you go to the next slide, I can show you another thing that was really exciting, which is the line showing how our tracking can go directly into Redshift, meaning we can own the data and ultimately show in visualizations within Looker, which allows us to get this data to more people in the company. So with this in our hand, Looker and Segment, and our goal of making data more consistent across departments, Megan's going to dive into 2 very specific goals.
Great. So having Segment in our arsenal of tools along with Looker is really great because it allows us to make the most of our data because we own the raw data. This ensures that the data that we're sending to all of our destinations and tools are the same across platforms and code base. And it also ensures that if a tool goes down like Mixpanel or Optimizely, that even if the reporting goes down, we still have access to that hard data. And while there are endless things that we can now do, there were two main goals that we collaborated on as a product and analytics team and agreed to focus on for 2018. The first goal was to improve our conversion rate tracking, and this ideally meant creating a custom solution versus relying solely on a black box tool. So for example, as a product team, we've mentioned multiple times, we've been using Mixpanel to calculate conversion. And this is great for us because it allows us to look at conversion in terms of users. Our analyst team has been relying heavily on GA, which looks at conversion on a session level. And so immediately having these two metrics that seemingly look the same and sound the same, but are based on different based on different data points, makes it really challenging for us to not only identify the misalignment, but trace it back to one source of truth. The second goal that we have is to improve our understanding of users' pre and post-purchase behavior. As we talked about earlier, one of our main focuses when we started optimizing our core purchase flow was to improve conversion rate across our apps and website for our reservation service. One of the ways that we optimize this, and we'll go into more detail in a little while, is by creating a more anonymous user flow that allowed users to check out as a guest on our apps. This became really challenging because now that users were more anonymous, it was difficult to track their pre-purchase behavior to their post-purchase behavior once they had completed their purchase and were actually an identified user. And while we'll go into more details about both of these goals and share more stories, this is the high-level focus for the two things that we are really trying to knock out for 2018.
Yeah, so to begin diving into the single source of truth for conversion rate, this problem really arose and came even in bigger light a couple of months ago when our CEO was asking a simple question, a question that sounds simple, like, what is our conversion rate in our Philadelphia market? And he was given different answers based on different departments. So from marketing, they were answering the question in terms of a very specific SEO landing page flow, and product was answering the question in terms of a very specific iOS user flow. So it became very difficult to understand the joint impact of all efforts from all departments on this conversion rate. And it was difficult to align on what conversion rate we should all be looking at. As Megan explained, there was Mixpanel where you could, it's based on users, GA was based on sessions, and there were some things you could customize to make them more similar, but the limitations of a black box tool is like there are rules that are built in and you can't always customize it directly to what you want to look at as a business. So ultimately, when we were choosing this single source of truth, we realized that we probably had to do it ourselves. And doing it ourselves is not as easy as it sounds. There were a lot of meetings to get alignment on what this conversion rate should be. Should it be users? Should it be sessions? What should be the top of the funnel? If this doesn't include all edge cases, is that okay? So we went through a couple meetings of just nailing down this definition, and ultimately, we can't give everyone exactly what they want, but at least being able to tell them exact numbers of what is included and is not included and put that on the roadmap for future iterations was enough to get everyone aligned. So with the definition, which was definitely the hardest part, the solution was getting our data engineers involved and building out the data so that we could eventually push it into Looker and create visualizations off of it and serve it to the entire company. So with that, Megan's going to go into an example of a meeting she was in where this would have been very helpful.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, fun anecdotal story. I know that there are a lot of product managers listening into this webinar, so hopefully you guys can commiserate with this one. But I had a recent experience where having consistent data across our teams would have been really helpful. And so let me set the stage. For context, 2018, one of our main goals was to build out a more robust airport parking product. As part of the project, we held these monthly task force meetings with stakeholders to share status updates, review performance metrics, follow up on any action items from previous meetings. It's pretty standard stuff. I had just taken over the project from a previous product manager, so there was kind of some stuff that was lost in transition. And so I was really planning on using this meeting as a way to get alignment with the team, just get a gauge of where everyone was at, how everyone was feeling about the project, and really align on next steps. So as a product manager with an education background, there's two things that you should know about me. The first is that I've been in a lot of meetings, and the second is that I love to hear myself talk. So I will say this was, nothing that I was concerned about, but this was the first time in my career as a product manager or in general where I've ever received feedback about how terrible the meeting was from one of our SVPs and executive stakeholders, which was about as fun as it sounds. So got some terrible feedback. What happened in the meeting? Why was it so bad? Well, essentially, when we started to discuss the performance metrics each team was responsible for in order to ensure our project success, we realized that departments' understanding of these metrics were all slightly different. Product was incredibly focused on conversion and improving the core purchase funnel. Marketing and SEO were heavily invested in site traffic and improving the amount of inventory at all airport locations. And our supply team was really focused on inventory, but mainly where we were getting the inventory and what type of inventory we were securing. It became clear that different teams involved felt a lack of ownership over their data and their success metrics, which in turn led to the data either not getting used or looked at, or worse, a lot of finger pointing, which is what ended up happening in this meeting. So essentially, we had failed to align on a metric for success, and as a result, we had to stop what we were doing and focus on aligning all of our efforts on coming up with a scalable solution for how we were going to look at this data and these metrics going forward, so that we could be confident that we were making decisions based off of the right metrics. So what made identifying the issue initially even more challenging was that each team was using different tools to look at the data. So not only were we looking at different metrics, but we were also looking at different metrics using different tools, which made it difficult to monitor consistency of data across squads. Some of our teams were also exporting the data from tools like GA and then sharing those out through Google Sheets. Others were using Looker or Mixpanel to pull reports. There was no alignment on tools, there was no alignment on data. It was kind of a free-for-all. And while I would like to say that this is a solution that is now completely resolved, clearly this is not something that gets solved overnight, right? They're still going to have people who prefer to use their methods, who prefer to use their tools. So it can be challenging to get everyone on board. But what I will say is, in this meeting, aligning on the data and being able to have a conversation around where we were getting our metrics from and what those metrics mean really opened the door for meaningful discussions and better conversations about our data. If you take a look at this slide on the screen, you can see a sample of what a Looker funnel visualization would look like using segment event data. So this would be data that we would normally look at as a product team in Mixpanel, because we haven't been able to get it from Mixpanel into Looker. And segment allows us to do that. So it's a cool opportunity for us to take these data from all of these different tools that different team members feel more comfortable using, focus our efforts in training employees on how to use Looker and how to get the information that they need on their own, that education piece that will allow us to scale this going forward, and also really gives us the opportunity to monitor the data that we look at and make sure it's consistent. Using this segment data really has been helpful for us, and it's going to do great things. And while this meeting may have been one of the worst in SpotHero history, I will say that identifying the issue and addressing it head on really helped prevent a lot of future issues and future blockers that would have delayed us from delivering these products and getting the most out of our data once we do launch. So a lot of really exciting things happening, but really just the ability to share this out across an entire organization and onboard people for one tool is what we're most excited about. And with that, I'll kind of go into our next goal, which was to improve user tracking. And one of the challenges we mentioned earlier was, now that we were allowing users to check out as guests, it became difficult to tie those anonymous or non-purchase behavior back to that one user once they've completed a purchase. Kate touched on this in one of her earlier slides as well, and I kind of addressed it myself, but one of the unforeseen benefits of using a tool like Segment and Looker in conjunction with each other is that it allows us to use one single tool for all of our data needs, whereas in the past we would have had to go through multiple tools like Mixpanel for user journey and events, Optimizely for A/B testing results, Looker for transactional data, that sort of thing. For example, as a product team, we talked about how we rely heavily on Mixpanel and mostly to see how our products are performing. So while Mixpanel is great for capturing these user events, it's a tool which we didn't plan to roll out to everyone across the company. It didn't make sense to open this up to all team members because we didn't have the bandwidth to onboard everybody. And it also didn't make sense on a user level because it wasn't a tool that we thought most people would be looking at on a daily basis. And as a result, that turned Mixpanel into from a shared resource into a product-only tool. And this is bad because there were limitations that we couldn't do with Mixpanel as well, like aliasing and identifying users. These limitations made it incredibly difficult for us to connect a user's pre-purchase behavior when they weren't logged in back into Mixpanel once we had identified them and tie them all together, because Mixpanel doesn't allow for retroactive aliasing. So if a user was already tied to an ID, even if we knew that they had performed certain events under a different user ID, those two pieces of information were always separate. We could never tie them back to one another. And what's really awesome about Segment is that since we own all of the data and we've collected all of the data, everything that was previously anonymous can now be backfilled in our database. So this obviously requires a little bit more engineering resource, and we'll go into a bit more of how this solution applies to other areas of our business. But being able to take advantage of a more robust user tracking and get more information about our users is really what is going to set us up for future success and ensure that we're growing and scaling our product in a way that meets our user needs. So Kate, take us through an example.
Sure. So if you go to the next slide, here is an example of analysis we did when we were investigating how a certain feature was performing that was added this summer, and that feature is monthly parking in our native app. So historically, you could only purchase a monthly parking spot on web. Opening up to native app opened it up to our most active user base. So in a historical world, product would be looking at this data and they'd be looking at the user flow in the funnel, but they wouldn't be able to easily tie this back to actual users and email addresses. And marketing and supply would be looking at this data, but mostly from a transactional standpoint. So looking at the numbers after someone actually made a purchase. So what we were able to do by combining all the data sets in Looker is exemplified on this slide. So here is a list of emails that are filtered by customers that we could identify as making an active monthly parking search in the past 7 days, but who had not converted. So we're pulling that pre-purchase behavior from Segment, and then with Looker, we're appending to that data other definitions about the users that we have, such as lifetime rentals, or what is that user's most common device that they purchase with, or what is that user's most common neighborhood that they park at. And ultimately, this allowed us to understand better the users who were engaging with this new feature. And even better, we were able to act upon it by giving our marketing team the data and the ability to do more personalized communications to drive more conversions. So to sum up, there is a lot we can do with combining this data together. We've already seen a ton of benefits in terms of making our meetings more efficient, helping with communication, just getting more out of our data. There is much more to do from here. It's not just about the tools that you choose, but it's really creating that culture of wanting to be looking at the same data and caring about data and caring about the maintenance and quality of that data. So that is really going to be, I would say, 2019's goal, if I'm gonna not talk too early, is really how do we maintain this and make sure that the company is always seeing this as important. And so with that, I know there's time for questions later, but if you do have any questions for Megan and I, please feel free just to reach out by email.
Thanks, guys.
And now we'll be moving on to the second segment of of our presentation today. Diana Smith, Director of Product Marketing, will be talking to us about Segment's point of view. So Diana, why don't you please take it away?
Great, thanks, Hannah. I'm Diana, as Hannah mentioned, and I lead the product marketing team here at Segment. Similar to Kate and Megan, I've been at Segment for over 4 years, so it's been fun to see the company grow really quickly, and I've been working with Aaron at Looker for a long time as well, which is lots of fun. If you're not familiar with Segment, we call ourselves customer data infrastructure, and our goal is to help companies all over the world like SpotHero put their customers first with the right data infrastructure. And listening to Kate and Megan, wasn't really surprised to hear this story. This is a story we hear pretty frequently from different business intelligence and product teams that we work with. When they're trying to use data to drive their decision making, there's a few core challenges that product teams face. First is productivity. So if you want to use data as a product team, you're probably going to have to deploy your very valuable engineering and developer resources on doing some type of integration work or data cleaning work, instead of having those engineers working on building new features and running new tests that you want to use. The second problem is, as Kate and Megan had mentioned earlier, it's really easy to lose trust in your data when different teams have different understandings of what the data means, and it doesn't match up across the different tools your team uses. In the worst case scenario, which actually happens fairly frequently, companies stop using data at all because they can't get aligned on what they think is right. So they're just like, I think this is the way we should go. I'm going to do that anyway. Don't know if that resonates with any of you folks in the audience. And then lastly, when your data is not consistent or clean, it also hurts the user experience, because not only are the analyses you're doing potentially incorrect, whatever insights you're getting from those analyses, but if you're triggering any communications for retention or activation, or if you're triggering any in-app personalization experiments from that data, if it's wrong, your customers might be getting an experience that doesn't really make sense for them. It's not very surprising why this is a problem, and it's because for most organizations, data integration happens team by team and channel by channel. So this means the product team wants to use Mixpanel. They're going to integrate that with a few of their mobile apps and maybe later their website. Then, the marketing team wants Google Analytics. The analytics team wants to use Redshift and Looker. And by doing these at different times, you have inconsistent data across these different tools, and also siloed data where the data is sitting, for example, in a Salesforce or somewhere where you can't actually get access to it alongside the other data you want to analyze with it. At Segment, we take a different approach, and the main thing that we allow companies to do is decouple the data integration piece or the data from the data collection. So we allow you to collect every single interaction you have with your users across every channel. So whether that's mobile, your website, backend servers, maybe even in store, collect that in one place, clean it, and then tie it to a user profile so you understand both their anonymous and identified history, as they were saying before. And this is quite different from an ETL tool because we're understanding the user at the source. From there, we can load that data in and send it off automatically to any of 200 tools on our catalog. So in this instance, it was Redshift with analyzing with Looker and Mixpanel and Optimizely. All of that same data can go to those different tools. To dive deeper into what Kate and Megan were talking about before, I want to walk you through what are the different steps that many of our customers take to really drive that alignment we were talking about that's required to be able to use your data effectively across your organization. I'm going to walk you through how you at your organization can get this together as well. So the first step is really to sit down and decide, what data do you want to track? Very rarely do people spend the time to do this. I'm curious if you've ever, said, product launches tomorrow. Oh crap, how are we going to analyze this? Like, let's throw some events in there, and engineer, please, add some events in. That's not a recipe for success if you want to later be able to use all of your data together. So we really recommend taking the time across your organization to define what are your data points you want to collect, down to the properties, what does that even mean, and then what are the data types. Get really granular about what this data is and why you're tracking it, and put that in a centralized place. It could be a spreadsheet in Segment, you can upload it, wherever it is, make sure that people have access to it and they know what the data points are that you're collecting and why. From there, you can send that spec off to a developer to integrate, and we really recommend you use the same naming conventions and the same events across different applications. So for example, in the SpotHero case, they probably have things that you can do on their website and on their mobile app. You want to use the same event names no matter where it is you're tracking them, because it becomes a lot easier to analyze that down the road. Again, with Segment, if you use our API, you can just track this data once instead of multiple times for every other tool you might want to use that data for. Next, it really helps if you can validate the data. So what this means is understanding from that tracking plan what's not actually coming through that you hoped would. So for example, if SpotHero really wants, maybe their most important event is an order completed event, or when someone actually checks out. That event is not valuable if it doesn't have the revenue associated with it, or if it doesn't have the parking lot ID, some way to understand where that thing happened. So this type of a report would help you understand which of these are not happening, which data points are you not receiving. You can do this. We've seen a number of companies actually build this themselves to have some kind of testing environment where they're seeing what data is working and not, or you can do this in Segment. And then taking it a step further, we actually recommend that customers quarantine any data that does not meet their tracking plan, because that way in Looker, when you're analyzing tables, you don't have a bunch of crap, cruft in there that's messing it up. You have lots of these columns you don't want. Before we started using this tool, a lot of the folks on our team were using our own production account to test analytics tracking, which was bad news. So we have these weird tables like pizza, and it's kind of embarrassing given that we're a data company. So I definitely recommend you don't do that and block any events that don't match your tracking plan. If you have a little bit more of a laissez-faire approach, which is totally fine, and if maybe only one property isn't there, but it's not super important, you can also allow that through. So up to you how you want to do that, but we really recommend having some kind of way for you to stop any data from hitting your data warehouse if it's not correct and doesn't meet your tracking plan. The next step is to connect it to all of your tools. As we mentioned, it's really beneficial to your company to collect every single piece of information about the customer journey in one time and then integrate that to multiple tools you want to use. Whether you're analyzing it with Redshift or BigQuery, Snowflake, or as a product team, you might be driving emails or push notifications to increase activation or drive more retention. All of those tools you'd use to do that, even A/B testing, really need the same data about who your users are, and what they're doing. So integrating it consistently will help you have that experience be the same in all those tools and have that report and mix panel match that report in Looker. Once your data is in all of your tools, you're not quite done. You have one more step. As Kate and Megan were mentioning, we were talking about how you should align on what the raw data is that you're collecting, the event level data. But the next thing you have to do to get everyone on the same page is decide how do those raw events level up into metrics. So for example, an active user could be measured for most companies in a bunch of different ways. Is it like they use it once? Do they use this feature? Do they use that feature? Getting your whole company aligned on what those core KPIs are really important for you to be speaking the same language and to not have a bad meeting situation like Megan was discussing earlier where you are aligned on the metric. And one of the really cool things about working with Looker is that when you have all the raw data in Looker, you can build models for these metrics. So for example, whatever your active user is, and then apply that same definition and that same logic across multiple tables and queries and charts that your team is building throughout their organization. If you do these steps and take the time up front to decide what you want to track and make sure that what you want to track is what actually gets into your tools downstream, you're going to solve a lot of these problems that we talked about before. Your developer is going to be able to actually work on new features based on the analysis that you've done. You'll trust the data and you'll stop getting in these data fights and actually be able to make decisions and move faster. And your customers are going to have a better experience. Thanks again. I'm Diana from Segment, and feel free to check us out if you want to see what it's like for yourself. And with that, I'm going to hand it on over to my good friend Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I work for Looker. I work with our technology partners, including Segment. I've been at Looker for about 4 years, which seems to be the common theme among us all. I'm going to give a deeper dive into Looker, the product, how the Looker Segment solution works, and then some specific examples about how Looker and Segment can be used for product analytics, including some specific customer examples. So first, what is Looker? On the next slide. For those unfamiliar with Looker, I'll give a brief overview. So Looker is a data visualization and exploration platform. And I'll still down our key differentiators into 3 main points, which hopefully should give you an idea of how it works. So first, Looker is in database. What this means is Looker connects to SQL data sources like Redshift, Google BigQuery, Snowflake, DB2, does all the transformation in the data source via SQL. What this means is Looker leverages the power of the underlying database and doesn't move the data elsewhere to do transformation. How Looker is able to accomplish this is via our LookML modeling layer. LookML serves as an abstraction of SQL. So it's where you define all of your business logic, including table relationships, dimensions, measures, from which everyone can build their own reports, which basically enables both data governance as well as self-service, which gives users the ability to create complex reports from trusted business definitions without having to know how to write SQL. And then finally, Looker is a web application. There's no desktop component. You can access it via the browser on whatever device you like, which makes it really easy to access, share, and collaborate across an organization. So next, I'll just cover what Looker looks like for in relation to Segment. I know Diana covered this a bit, but just quickly, you consolidate all of your Segment data into your SQL data warehouse. You can also bring in other sources that drive your business as well, like transactional data, as well as data from other applications that you're using. You create the standards in LookML, so in our modeling layer that serves as that abstraction of SQL. You can also leverage Looker blocks, which are templates for expected data sources like Segment that get you up and running quickly with metrics that are common across our customers that are using those sources. And then finally, all of that information is exposed in Looker in an easy to use interface from which you can find, explore, create your own reports, and ultimately ask and answer your own questions. And you can also send data from Looker directly to Segment to any of your downstream tools. So that makes it really easy to take the insights that you're gathering from Looker and act on them in the tools that you're using in your own business. So next, I'll cover some examples of the types of analyses you can do with Looker and Segment on your product, as well as some actual examples from our customers. So the first one is just talking about defining meaningful KPIs. I think Diana covered this a bit as well, but use Looker to standardize the metrics that determine performance and success for your business, and evaluate which metrics are the most valid and implement those across your entire organization's reporting. These can and should include standard metrics like DAUs, MAUs, and how you want to define them, but also specific indicators to your business and use cases. So an example of this for a specific customer of ours is for our customer Ibotta. Ibotta is a mobile technology company that enables users with its app to earn cash back on in-store and mobile purchases. They use Looker to develop an inventory score to determine what investment they should be making in the stores they support. This score is determined by the number of items covered by offers in a given store out of all of the available items. So a low score indicates the team needs to focus efforts on customer retention and sales in those stores, since they are most at risk because less items are covered by their offers. The next example I'll go over is customer retention. So using Looker to understand user retention and the factors that influence it. So leverage the application data collected with Segment to analyze duration and frequency that users are leveraging your platform and act on those results to optimize for your product. On the left, we have an example of analyzing user retention based on sign-up date, which is pretty standard. But in Looker, you can really slice and dice the data however makes sense. One of our customers, Harry's, is a subscription shaving company. They decided to analyze their retention based on the initial plan that their users were signing up for and realized there was a clear plan that resulted in keeping customers the longest. So they actually took that insight and designed their sign-up page to optimize for that plan to get more users starting on the plan that resulted in retaining them for the longest. And then finally, the last example I'll cover is A/B testing. So comparing and easily understanding the results from A/B testing using Looker and your data from Segment. So adding statistical significance to your test to ensure that you're adding the proper vigor to your analysis, avoiding erroneous conclusions, things like that. So commonly this can be used on application data to determine the performance of tested features. But with Looker, you can also analyze data from multiple sources like marketing campaigns. So one of our customers, ShopStyle, which is a fashion search platform that generates commission-based revenue based on what their users are searching for and ultimately purchasing. They use Looker for A/B testing for their email campaigns to determine the best performing content. So they basically send an email with 4 different subjects to 30% of their target audience, and based on the performance they're seeing from those specific emails, send the remaining 70% the best performing subject title to optimize performance of that campaign. And that's the end of my examples for how to use Looker for product analytics. So I think we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you so much, everybody. Yes, we have time for some audience questions. And before we begin, I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have recordings of all of the previous presentations available at the links at the bottom of the slide. So definitely make sure to check those out. It's been a great series. All right, so to begin, I have a question for the SpotHero team. But also Diana and Aaron, you might be able to weigh in as well. So we have an audience member who wants to know so you have these great analytics capacities now. When should they be mostly owned by a product manager, and when should you have a designated analyst? If you could talk maybe through what would be the best situation for those, what's the benefits of each, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one that we're still trying to figure out on our own as well. There's a balance between, product working with engineering and setting up tools that is really essential to things getting done and needing to be a part of that process to make sure things go smoothly. There also needs to be a handoff process as well. I think that being said, using tools like Segment and Looker initially, when we were pitching this from a product perspective, one of the features that was really appealing to us was the ability to quickly integrate with a bunch of different tools. Not only does this allow us to cut down on the time it was taking us to evaluate and review a product and then go through all of the steps to figure out if we were integrating with the SDK or the API, this ability to control the data and push it to different destinations from one source that we are confident is the correct data source is really appealing to us. And then I think, Kate, you can probably talk about the handoff process.
Yeah, so I think, it's important because the product managers are in charge of so much that they value data and they understand data and they know what data we need. But at the end of the day, does it make sense for a product manager to be building out all of the tools they're using and all the dashboards? Probably not. The great thing about the analyst team is because they're across all of the departments, they can bring in all of the pieces of the puzzle of what's going on in the company. So we can look at product features, but we can also look at supply changes or maybe marketing changes and add that. So it really needs to be both coming together.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And so that would kind of, using how you two just outlined it, our audience members could kind of think about where they stand. And most of our audience members are product people, so they can think about where they stand and how they would pitch this sort of technology to their company if they were going to integrate it. Diana, Aaron, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. So the question's how they would pitch getting this technology to their company?
Yeah, and do you think that the entry point might be more through a product manager or a designated analyst?
Great question. So at Segment specifically, we do touch a lot of different teams in terms of benefits, both product, analytics, engineering, even growth marketing. So what we've usually seen work best is that there's a champion who's the closest to the data. And in different companies, it's a different person. Sometimes it's a VP of engineering, sometimes it's a VP of data, sometimes it's a VP of product that really cares about having that data be correct and consistent and helping the rest of the company really use that data. So we would really recommend figuring out what are the pain points in your company that you're facing today with data. It probably goes beyond the product team. So you might want to start your first test case with the product team. So getting the product data, analyzing that data, but then also looking for other areas where other parts of your company are having trouble with data, whether it's in analytics, maybe engineering spending too much time on ETL processes or integrations, and building a business case across your whole organization that you can show how this piece of technology will help multiple teams. But to start with, we do have champions that drive a purchase who are in product or in analytics, and usually also loop in someone on the engineering side of the house who wants to not deal with this anymore.
Got it. That makes sense. And then sort of a similar question that Diana and Aaron, maybe you can help answer is, we have an audience member who is looking into both these embedded analytics and data hygiene vendors, and they're wondering what are some of the core capabilities that they should be looking at when they're evaluating the market.
Aaron, do you want to go first and then I'll follow you up?
Sure. So I think one of the core differentiators of Looker that I covered was data governance. And what this means is having consistency in reporting across an organization. And I think, what SpotHero covered that being an issue, when they were first getting started around disagreement in metrics across departments causing, inconsistency in reporting. So what Looker does is it helps you enable that consistency. And I think that consistency with self-service is definitely something that should be considered if you're trying to make your organization data-driven. Not only should your users have access to that data, but they should make sure that they can trust those metrics based on a single source of truth.
Yeah, and for the customer data infrastructure type evaluation, there's a few things you want to look out for to make sure that it's going to work for your business. Number one is it going to work for your business today and scale for tomorrow? So do they have the sources of data that you want to use and the destinations, what we call them, or integrations that you want to use that you're currently using and that you feel like you might want to use next year and the year after? Because you want to centralize that data and be able to replay your historical data into a new tool when you want to switch around. So that's really important. The second is developer experience. So the key to making something like this work that's so close to the data in your websites and your mobile apps is the developer experience really positive, and developers want to integrate this. Their APIs are simple, documentation's easy to use, so that you're not going to get pushback from that side of the house, and it's done right and well, so that then the developers never need to worry about it again. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing that I'd recommend looking for is, what are the reliability metrics? So if something's as important as your data, you need that data to be reliably in your tools, not just for analytics. I think that's important, but even more importantly for if you're triggering emails, if you're doing any real-time analysis or real-time use cases, you want to make sure that the data infrastructure you buy is going to be able to stand up for your scale.
Diana, can you talk a little bit more about those reliability metrics? What sort of how a potential customer might evaluate whether they're in place for their particular use case?
Sure. So usually you can ask the company to say, hey, do you have a status page that's open that I could take a look at and just see what your deliverability metrics are across your different integrations? Also, you can ask them, like, what do they do to account for some key issues that can happen in a data pipeline? So for example, on mobile, if the internet loses connection, are they deduping the data to make sure, or are they storing the data and retrying it if the internet connection leaves? And then once it hits the front door of that pipeline, are they deduping it in case a data point was sent twice? So those are things that if you're maybe, building your own solution, you're probably not going to build into your own platform. But if you're buying something, you should take a look at to see how are they taking data from, like, if internet connectivity is wrong, and then once the data is in, how do they deal with spikes in traffic? What's their policy around that? And then also, do they give you personally any visibility into what your own deliverability is from, like, your website to your tools, and allow you to have that transparency versus being more of a black box?
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, basically thinking about where things could go wrong. All right, we have a question from an audience member specifically about Looker. So Erin, this one's for you. Mark wants to know, can Looker pull data from SAP? Or
From
SAP?
SAP?
Yes.
So yeah, Looker can connect to SAP HANA, but you also can pull data from other SAP data sources into your data warehouse that you've connected to Looker. So as long as the data source is in one of our supported databases, which we support, I think it's over 40 data sources that we've found are just most common across our customers, as well as support robust enough SQL for Looker. So the answer is yes, assuming you can get it to a place that is connected to Looker. We can't connect directly to anything other than a SQL database, though.
Perfect, thank you. And is there a place where our audience members can see all of those databases that Looker can connect to?
Yep, yeah, our documentation is public. It's just docs.looker.com. So you can check that out and see all of the different options that you have.
Excellent. So yeah, definitely check that out if you're curious to see if Looker can pull data from the database that you have in mind. All right, this question is for Megan and Kate. And so this audience member is wondering, what were some of the telltale signs that you encountered regarding needing a single source of truth prior to the meeting that Megan talked about?
It really was people working in silos and people not being as open to other people's ideas and data points because they didn't understand them as well as their own. And, kind of understanding that everyone needs to be able to do their day-to-day. So, to tell our marketing team not to use Google Analytics to measure like paid search performance or SEO performance would not be right. And to tell our product team not to use Optimizely to see how a change in user flow was impacting them did not make sense. But at the end of the day, when people were trying to celebrate their wins and they couldn't explain how their win had an effect on the whole of the business, they either weren't getting the acknowledgement that they deserved, or we were maybe celebrating wins too early. So enough of this happened where we realized we needed to have kind of a neutral source of truth that was analyst defined.
And I think also on top of that, it was challenging to even identify that we had issues with alignment, because at the time it's, I think pretty typical for all product managers can probably relate to this. You're so focused on moving quickly and using data to make decisions that a lot of times the data that you're using is very reactive. So you're launching an A/B test and then you're using that data to make decisions and then communicating that outwards. And it's those little things that where you think you're so aligned and you think like this makes sense. I'm communicating in terms of metrics that people understand, where we would just continue to see feedback and questions kind of roll through. So on top of the challenges with just identifying the issue, it was kind of separating it from the noise of, are people not using the right tools or just coming to me because they need things right now? There was a lot to kind of unpiece here. And I will say, Kate and I, aside from being together in this company for a very long time, we're also good friends. And a lot of the reason that I think I had been so successful at SpotHero prior to this was because I had known enough about what each team was working on to really value that consistent share of information across teams. And so her and I were able to partner together and really drive through the importance of making this decision. And now that we've kind of gotten it to a place where people are becoming on board and we've had enough of these like data brawls where people feel like they can then they're frustrated, and we're all frustrated. And so it's hard to implement these changes, but I think getting people on board, opening the door for these conversations, no matter how difficult they are to have, it really leads to positive outcomes in the end.
That's great. And I'm sure that the product managers in the audience can really relate to how you were talking about how, you were in a bit of a better spot because you already had this relationship with the other teams where you kind of knew what was going on. And I know that's kind of a product manager's bread and butter, but to feel that you have to rely on that definitely means that there's an opportunity for some positive change. Erin or Diana, do you have anything to weigh in about any sort of telltale signs that a company may be in need of defining this single source of truth?
Sure, happy to jump in. I think it often does come from an executive asking for a report and everyone being like, how do I pull that report? And it seems like it should be something fairly straightforward. But you have to go ask a bunch of people like, so what do we call this? Like, what's, the active user? How do we count our customer? These things that should be universally described. And usually I think the sign is when someone a few levels up asks for something that you realize everyone's on a different page. Or another time is if you notice conversions dropping, that's another way to see, like, if you see your part of the funnel that you care about is there's something wonky going on, probably something else happened in another part of the funnel that you should be connected with and be looking at the entire funnel. So maybe, product usage drops. Did marketing drive a campaign that maybe was having low quality users, for example? So when your own metrics drop, I think that's another good opportunity to connect with the teams that are adjacent to you to make sure that everyone's on the same page and is looking at the full user journey.
That's a good point. And I have definitely been there being asked for those reports that should be so much easier to pull than they are. Erin, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, I think data centralization into one place versus working in these siloed tools, not only enables you to build that single source of truth, but also enables you to see other influencing factors outside of your just domain. So what marketing factors are affecting your product and other sources that may be influencing as well. So I think, yeah, I agree with everybody else's points too.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we have time for one last question, and we're going to this one. I think everybody might have a little answer for. So why don't we go SpotHero segment and then Looker for answering this. But when have you ever found, once data is so much more accessible and there is this single source of truth, and all of these departments are able to access data much more easily, does it ever change the relationships between departments? Does anybody ever get maybe possessive over data or start presenting it, maybe not fully understanding it, or I guess, or on the positive side, how have you seen this sort of data empower teams that wouldn't necessarily have been using it in the past?
Yeah, so I think an interesting example from our company is we moved from a more decentralized analyst landscape to more centralized. And what was happening is, certain departments were getting more analyst resources, and therefore they had more tools and reports building. And so they were coming to meetings with kind of more data than other departments, which at the beginning just put them into an advantage, even if the other department's data was equally or more important. So moving to centralized, and we have a centralized analyst team with very clear dotted lines to different departments, but it kind of allows us as a group to prioritize what is the data that's going to have the biggest impact to the company, no matter what department it is. And so we can kind of even out those conversations.
And then, from the product perspective, how have those relationships changed? I think prior to this integration, we were really asking our stakeholders when they submitted requests to come back to us with hard metrics on like, give us information around how this will, like your guess on how this will improve conversion so we can run the numbers. And what we found were people would just not do it. And as a result, requests took a lot longer because product managers were following up on the information on their own and getting it together. And then the feedback loop then had to be closed again. So it just made the process really a lot of touch points on the process. So by having one source of truth that we can train people on, not only are we able to give that education piece of me being able to go back and say, here's the tool, come back to me with the information, but it also allows us to educate people on how to use the tool, which will help us scale going forward. And I think just right off the bat, we're starting to see, we're at least having more conversations about the data, and we're starting to see people feeling confident getting it on their own, and then coming into meetings and really being excited about it to share it out, because at the same time, you know, this is the information we need to make good decisions. And I think everyone wanted to be able to make the right decisions. It was just how much effort was involved to get this information in the first place.
That's a really good point. I'd say I've noticed a few trends when data starts to really be democratized across an organization. Actually, I find that there's more trust than less trust across the organization if it's a data-driven organization and people know that no matter what department you're in, you are trying to base your, like, inform your decisions on data. I think it actually helps when you go into a cross-functional meeting and someone says, hey, based on this analysis, I think we should do this. There's more trust and less like, well, tell me how you got to that, place. I think it's actually generally good. And what I find usually is that when there is access to data, it begets more questions. So when you actually have visibility into what's going on, there's always some area of a business that's not performing as well as you want it to be performing, where you want to dig in and try to figure out why. So when everyone in the organization understands, like, has that visibility, I think as a global organization, you can decide, where are the areas, these like not so good yellow areas, where are they, and where do we want to deploy even more analyst resources to understand what's going on and how we can change whatever it is we're doing, whether it's on the product side or the marketing side or even success, to improve those areas of the business.
And Erin, do you have any final thoughts about the positive impacts when, as Diana put it so well, when data gets democratized?
Yeah, I know we're running out of time here, but at Looker, we're pretty unique in that I think everyone uses our own product in their own job function, and we've definitely seen positive impacts from that. I think everybody has access to as much data as we're able to give, and they use that to kind of drive their decision making in their roles.
That's great. Thank you so much. And yes, we are just out of time. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves. I really had a great time today. Thanks so much to our sponsor, Looker, our guests, Kate Owens and Megan Bubley at SpotHero, Diana Smith at Segment, and Erin Franz at Looker, and to all of you for attending and asking such great questions. I'm Hannah Flynn, and you can find Product Management Today on Twitter at ProdMGMT Today. This was our final session in the series. You can find all of the links to access all of the previous sessions at the URLs listed at the bottom of this slide. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.